Welcome to the Unitarian Universalists of Transylvania County. So glad to have you with us on this morning. For all of you in this room and all of you there online, we welcome you no matter who you are, no matter who you love, no matter how you identify. We are glad that you are with us in this journey. Our mission is to support individual spiritual journeys and promote social, economic, and environmental justice. I make sure I read that mission statement the first Sunday of every month just to keep us in memory of what we're about here, to help out those of you who are new to the congregation to learn about us as well and what we focus on. I have an initial announcement, and then I'm going to turn it over to others to add to our announcements so they can speak from the microphone up in the pulpit. I want to remind you this is the very last day to turn in your ministry survey. You've had 2 weeks to look at it. You got to get it in. We had a short report at the board meeting, how many had come in so far, and they're going to start compiling all the results of those who have turned it in. So please see what you can do to get that in. I appreciate it, and the board appreciates it. For our special announcements this morning, first I'm going to invite forward Kim Moya to speak about the dinner.
Good morning, everybody. Well, we will not talk only about dinners. We're going to talk about what we call now Unitarian supporting dinners, but we used to call before circle dinners. They keep being exactly the same thing. It's an opportunity to get together with some UU fellows and to develop a better relationship. But at the same time, we would like to support the financial situation of this organization, of the UU. Then we'll ask the people that can do it to make a donation of $40 to the UUTC. For sure, anybody that will be a task difficult to accomplish, to give the $40. We want for you to come to the dinner anyhow. You can, if you want to attend some of the dinners, either like a guest, or you want to organize the dinner as a host, we have the subscription list on the lobby. Put your name over there. There are 3 dates, October 14, middle of November, and beginning of December. And we would like to have you there. Again, it's a good way to develop friendship with UU members, and also it's a good way to help the financial situation of the church. Any question, give me a call or send me an email. Thank you.
Thank you, Kim. I invite Bill Carpenter to come forward for a special announcement.
Good morning again. I'm Bill Carpenter. I'm Candy's husband, if you don't know. I'm here to speak on behalf of the Sharon House, which is our social action agency for this month. And I'm sure you're all familiar with the food produce that Sharon House gives out. Well, Sharon House does a lot more than that. They give financial assistance to people whose home might lose their homes if their power are cut off, if they might lose their water or electricity, their heating bills. They provide financial assistance to those individuals. They also give personal items like toilet paper and other toiletries that are needful, like diapers and other things. They also give classes to help the individuals in our community to improve their skills and knowledge so that they might be able to use those newly acquired skills to lead a better life. They supply children's school supplies. They provide Christmas gifts for the children on Christmas. The sharing house does everything almost. As you, the budget, the staff for sharing house is unbelievable, and they have an army of volunteers that volunteer, many of which you have already volunteered. The budget for the sharing house is $2 million a year, a little over $2 million. They get some grants, but about 1.6 million is due to the donations of churches and individual donations. So let's help them out. In this new area that we are living in now, there's an increased need because of COVID, increased experiences. There's been a wealth of new clients that the sharing house has to support now. So let's help them out and open your pockets and purses today. I don't see anybody open for their wallet yet, but let's help them out.
Thank you, Bill. And we'll take the collection later, and we have the one envelope to put those extra checks in. We do try to give you lots of time to think about writing out a nice big check when we do this. All month long, we'll have the opportunity to have special collections for Sharing House. Thank you for voting for them to be on our list of charities. At this time, we turn our attention to the candles of joy and sorrow. We have one lit already, which I lit on behalf of Tom Stanwood. It's a candle for Joyce, who he says, we returned safely late yesterday from Chapel Hill UNC Hospital. Joyce's surgery was successful, and as a precaution, she had been kept several days longer than expected, but all is well. And he says, we thank all well-wishers during this experience. Are there other candles of joy or sorrow to be shared this morning? Yeah, go right ahead, Joe.
A candle for the passing of my aunt, Carrie Zinn, and high school classmate Roger Holden.
Jill lights this candle for the passing of her aunt and high school classmate. I'm having pointers here and there. Marcia?
Yes, a candle of joy for my family and circle of friends, which just keeps growing.
A candle of joy for Marcia's family and circle of friends, which keeps growing. Cadence. All right. Cadence lights a candle of joy for her dad's birthday. Happy birthday. Kevin, go ahead.
The candle to be lit for my father-in-law, Bruce, who's having some significant eyesight.
So this candle's lit for Kevin's father-in-law, Bruce, whose eyesight is giving him trouble. Tricia. So for Jovi's birthday this week, a candle, and for those of you who don't know, I think I saw Jovi working in the nursery this morning, so people can go in and wave. Jim?
Sue's Alzheimer's is progressing within the next 2 months, I will be moving to Clemson myself, to the same facility, but a different building, independent living.
So Jim, it's a candle of hope, but also I'm going to say it's a candle of sorrow for us to hear that Sue's Alzheimer's progressing, and that to help slow it down, you may move down there with her and to a new facility in Clemson. Yeah. Jane, did I see your hand? Yeah.
Candle of support for Elizabeth Thompson, 18, as she's grieving the loss of her beloved wife, River.
Yeah, let's keep Elizabeth Thompson in our hearts through her time of griefs. And my hearts go out. Thank you, Jane. We hold so many other things in our hearts and our thoughts. We'll light a candle for those things not yet shared, or perhaps in the minds of those who are in our online community. Let's remember the glow of all of these candles and the ways in which, by sharing, we weave together our community of care. This is what makes us a real congregation, by knowing the joys and sorrows of one another. Thank you. At this time, I ask that you turn and greet one another in a form of worthy recognition.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Michael Solomon. I'm honored to be your worship associate today. I've been a member of Unitarian Universalists of Transylvania County since 2017. Today's opening words are from Reverend Paul Dodenhoff, Minister Emeritus of the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of the Palisades in New Jersey. Reverend Paul was raised in an evangelical Christian family, but became interested in other religious paths early in his teens. His own journey led him to study and work within a wide variety of religious and spiritual traditions, much like many of us. While his personal practice is Shin Buddhism, he makes a spiritual home in Unitarian Universalists. Reverend Paul, the freedom to doubt, to question, to be content to live in mystery is central to the liberal religious tradition. Like the process of evolution itself, the path that we follow, our practice, if you will, it's not easy or simple. It isn't without its dead ends or its disappointments. It doesn't guarantee that our conclusions will be final or that we will ever find an answer to all of our questions. But also, like the process of evolution, it is filled with great expressions of beauty and awe that are sometimes born of great struggle and at other times come as unexpected grace. Come, let us worship together. Now please rise as you are able and willing for our opening hymn, Forward Through the Ages, hymn number 114 in the Singing the Living Tradition hymn book. The words will also be on the screen. Now at this time, Kim will lead us through our chalice lighting. Kim?
On his sermon, Reverend Bob will talk to us about Michael Cerveros. Who knows Michael Cerveros here? Oh, okay. One thing that perhaps you don't know about Michael Cerveros, he was a Renaissance man. He was born in the beginning of the 1500s. He was born in the part of Europe that now is Spain. This part of Spain in these old days, it was called the Kingdom of Catalonia and Aragon. And his language was not Spanish, his language was Catalan. I happen to be also a Catalan guy, and we're going to have here a text about Michael Cerveros, written by a UU person in Spain. First, we're going to read them in Catalan. For those of you that want to practice your Catalan, you can follow me. But if you are not brave enough to do that, after we're going to have the translation in English, we could read it all together in English also. I'm sorry?
It's like French and Spanish combined.
Oh, well, it's a different language. Yeah, it's a Latin language, okay? But, you decide by yourself. Ensenem aquest calze en memòria de Miquel Servet, que va morir a l'octubre fa més de 450 anys, defensant el seu dret de pensar i creure de manera independent. Ell va dir, tant de bo que tots poguéssim parlar lliurement en les nostres esglésies. I així reconeixem en la lliure expressió del pensament i en la diversitat d'opinions, la base de la nostra llibertat. Now in English. We light this chalice in remembrance of our forebear Michael Cerveros, who died in the month of October, more than 450 years ago, defending his right to think and believe independently. He said, I wish that everybody was freely allowed to speak in our churches. And so we recognize in the free expression, thought, and the diversity of opinions the basis of our liberal faith.
And now I ask Kevin Lausch to come up and give us the story, the message for all ages.
Good morning, everyone. My name's Kevin Lausch, and it's my joy to work with the kids and youth. And this morning, we're going to have the story of the sapling and the mushroom. Well, in this forest, a big fat mushroom grew up and popped up, and it grew pretty quickly there. And near it, it had a little friend, and its friend was a little sapling, kind of like this one. It's skinny, had just a few leaves on it. Took a while for it to grow up, about a year. And one day the mushroom looks over and says, "Hey, Skinny, I've been watching you. You grow kind of slow. It's taken you about a year to reach where you are, but I just seem to pop up almost overnight." And the sapling said, "Yeah, that's true." And the mushroom asked, "Well, I got a question for you. If something hits a mushroom, it kind of falls over and goes to pieces. But if something hits you, you bend over, but you pop back up. What's going on?" And the mushroom thought and said, "Well, I have these things below me called roots. And roots reach deep into the ground. And when something hits me, I can get knocked over, but I just hold on tight with my roots, and then I can pop back up." And the mushroom thought, "Wow, that's really amazing. How do you get these roots?" "Well," said the sapling, "I have to grow them. And I've been growing mine for at least a year underground." And the mushroom just started laughing and laughing. "Growing for a year something you can't even see? Well, that's ridiculous." "Well," the sapling said, "that might be true." The mushroom asked, "When you've grown these fancy roots of yours, what do you hope to be?" And the sapling thought for a minute, then pointed up with one of its leaves. "You see that great big oak tree at the top of the hill? That's my mother. And when I grow up to be as strong and big as her, I'm going to stand against the winds, and I think I'll be all right." And that's just a little story to say growing our roots takes time, particularly investing in kids and helping them grow their roots and learn their families, where they're from, their history, such as Michael Servetus. It takes time, but those roots help to hold us strong and get the winds that blow against us. And now Gus Renner will be coming up with our candle, and we're going to light our children's chalice candle and then sing them out.
I'm grateful. I'm grateful for this congregation and all we do. We heard during the candles, people are grateful for the community support that folks have had through tough times, and also inviting our support during joyous times such as birthdays. I'm grateful for the ways in which our religion has roots in this community, roots in North Carolina, roots in America, roots in the world, and all the way back even to Transylvania itself overseas. None of this operates without material assistance. And so we ask you to be generous. None of us makes it through life without being stretched to have our hearts be generous. And so this brief ritual on Sunday mornings is to help us do that. Anything left loose in the offering baskets will come to this congregation and its good presence in the community. Anything placed in the envelope will go to Sharing House, our charity of the month. We will now gratefully receive the morning offering. Thank you, Joanna. Thank you, Bonnie. What's given in love we receive with great joy, and we say, thank you. I invite you to settle yourselves into a moment of prayer and meditation. Spirit of love and life, we who are here gathered on this day are sometimes much like the fall leaves just beginning to appear, withered up, ready to fall and blow away. May we remember that instead we are in a place of sustenance, a place of roots, a place where we can be sustained, green, growing, breathing. Spirit of love and life, in this time we reach out with our prayers in our hearts to those who are recovering for stays in the hospital. In particular this morning, we lift up Joyce in our thoughts and our prayers. We are with those who are grieving. We think of Elizabeth and her loss of River. And we think of Jill and the passing of her aunt and high school classmate. We understand as well the need for our love and support and prayers for those who are going through transitions, hoping for something that will help. In particular, this morning, our hearts reach out to Jim Null and family who are trying to help Sue in the best possible way, even as we know that we will be grieving the loss of knowing their family from week to week as they move to a new facility. Our hearts are joyous as well, because in our midst we have those of unnamed ages and named ones celebrating birthdays. Another trip round the sun on this great blue marble. We are grateful for those whose sense of who they are brings them time again to be here in this community year after year. We lift up those who are facing perhaps new needs for medical assistance, including those, in particular this morning, Bruce, Kevin's father-in-law, whose eyesight is giving him trouble. And our hearts go out to those we do not see with us this morning, with the hope that they are with us online, or if not there, that they know we miss them. These, the prayers of our hearts and the meditations of our minds, we now hold in a silence. In the names of all those, known and unknown, remembered and forgotten, in the names of all the helpers of humankind, we say, Amen, blessed be. We heard a snippet from Michael Servetus this morning. Thank you, Keem. And I approached Keem, I think after choir, and said, hey, would you be interested? And then Keem lit up. Wait a minute. I know about this person. And he knew the language. I know the English. I will read some more from Michael Servetus. This reading is from his second published work. After The Errors of the Trinity, he wrote some more. All seems to have been have a part of truth and a part of error. And each espies the error of others and fails to see his own. May God in his mercy enable us, without obstinacy, to perceive our errors. It would be easy to judge if it were permitted to all to speak in peace in the church, that all might vie in prophesying, and that those who are first inspired, as Paul says, might listen in silence to those who speak next, when anything is revealed to them. But today all strive for honor. May the Lord destroy all the tyrants of the church. Amen. So now you have a little hint of why the Spanish Inquisition was after him. And the Protestants in Geneva were after him. And guess what? He was anti-Trinitarian, and he believed in science, which I know is not well thought of these days in some environs. He's thought to have first discovered and correctly described the circulation system in a way that made sense before the people who were credited with understanding the circulatory system of the body. He was not the first, but among the most vocal and obnoxious about anti-Trinitarian, which means Unitarian in some ways. in where we get our name, labeled the heresy of Unitarians. He was a pretty interesting dude, and I would say in our roots is one of those people who were proudly, in our heritage, an obnoxious Unitarian who has helped set the way for the future. So I'll talk a little bit about it. I love that last phrase, may the Lord destroy all the tyrants of the church, amen. I don't think this is one of those people who shows up politely at your door and says, I'd like to talk to you about the Bible a little bit. This is the guy who shows up and writes to every authority whatsoever to say, you got it wrong. You got your religion wrong. Now, men's group this week, we had the topic, I led the topic of, so who's obnoxious? What is being obnoxious? How do we define it? How do we recognize it in others? How do we recognize it in ourselves? So the online dictionary, dictionary.com, said, it's a highly objectionable or offensive person or thing, and odious, such as obnoxious behavior. Second definition, annoying or objectionable due to being a show-off or an attracting undue attention to oneself, as in an obnoxious little brat or adult. Third was an archaic definition, exposed or liable to harm, evil, or anything objectionable. And an obsolete definition was listed as liable to punishment or censure or reprehensible. Quite likely the ones I'm speaking of are the ones under the archaic definition, those liable to punishment or censure and considered reprehensible. Yay, yay. Thank you for such organizations as the Spanish Inquisition, who help us determine immediately who is reprehensible. A book that was very influential to me when I was a college student. I thought it was a curious title. It was M.J. Savage's 1898 book called Our Unitarian Gospel. It said this: the conscience has been spoken of as though it were a sort of little deity set to rule man's nature, this little kingdom of thought and feeling and action. But conscience is nothing of the kind. Half the consciences of the world today are all wrong. Let me hint by way of illustration of what I mean. Calvin was just as conscientious in burning Servetus as Servetus was pursuing that course of action which led him to the stake. One of them was wrong in following his conscience then. Many of the greatest tragedies of the world have come about through these controversies and confusions of conscience. The Quaker in old Boston went at the cart's tail in disgrace because he followed his conscience, and the Puritan put him there because he followed his conscience. Were both of them right? The Inquisitor in Spain put to death hundreds and thousands of people conscientiously, and the hundreds and thousands of people conscientiously went to their deaths. We talk about Unitarian Universals following their conscience. And couldn't just everybody else follow their conscience? And well, they did. And they put our forebears to death in so doing. It's one of those interesting things when we look at our roots. What was it that the story from Kevin said? The mushroom falls over and goes to pieces. But the sapling puts down roots, spends a long time putting down roots, and can bend back and can withstand the winds and being trampled on to some extent at least. And I think that's why I wanted to give you this sermon. Our Soul Matters theme packet this month that you'll get today if you're signed up for it is on the gift of heritage. We have a heritage of those who have gone before us, who have put down roots, and oftentimes have done it because they were obnoxious. Jesus was obnoxious, at least the Pharisees thought so. Moses was obnoxious, the Pharaoh thought so. chased them across the sea. Muhammad was obnoxious. It seems like a whole lot of Jewish, Christian, and other people thought so. But they were all putting forward some ideas that said we should be able to worship our way. We believe this is what we have received as wisdom, and we want to follow it. The reference I just gave from that book that I had read in college from the 1890s about a Unitarian preacher and talking about religion and conscience and all of that, he mentioned the Quakers. Well, you see, if you were a Quaker in Massachusetts, you were unfortunate. Because, you see, the Puritans in Massachusetts didn't much want religious freedom for anybody but themselves, and the Quakers were considered dangerous, subversive, and an annoying pest. And so they would march them to the gallows and hang them. Mary Dyer, a Quaker, I've seen as a statue on my college campus, which was a college that was founded by the Quakers, and now her same statue has for many decades been right near the Commons in Boston, so you could see. Mary Dyer was brought to the gallows. The two men ahead of her were hanged in the late 1600s for being Quakers, and she was told, she was not until she was just about to step onto the gallows, they didn't want to make it easy on her, she was told that she could go. She had 48 hours to leave Massachusetts. So she did. What many folks who were told to leave Massachusetts did, they went to Rhode Island. She couldn't stand being in Rhode Island for more than a year when she decided that she had to go back and keep talking about religion to the people of Massachusetts whose ears seemed to be closed to the Quaker message. So she went back and they hung her. Now, if she had come to North Carolina, it might have been a little different. You see, I've been doing some research about our roots here in North Carolina about religious liberty, and it seems like Quakers, especially in the northern, to learn my history, Carolina stretched a long way, but the northern Carolinas had a very welcoming space for Quakers. So welcoming, in fact, that by the late 1600s, the Quakers were in charge of the government in northern Carolinas. So much so that they had Carey's Rebellion. Carey's Rebellion, for all of you who took 8th grade history here, would have been when Carey, who was the previous governor, didn't want to give up the governorship, wanted to fight to get it back. The new guy wanted to fight to keep it. The new guy was on the side of the Anglican Church, and Carey decided to be on the side of the Quakers, and there was a big old fight. Pretty interesting to know that there was some skirmishing around which people were in government. Well, by 1777, revolutionary times in North Carolina, the laws were made in a way that granted every individual the opportunity to follow their religion. Again, like I said, there are some places in the world, say Massachusetts, where this wasn't completely allowed. This is where I come to one of the earliest circuit riders who came down to North Carolina to preach universalism, the scourge religion of America, until it became the most popular. Universalism, the idea that there was no eternal hell, everybody was going to be saved. Universal salvation. Abner Kneeland came to North Carolina in about 1827 or so. They're said to have been Universalists here before that, but he's credited as being one of the very earliest to come down here and preach universalism. Now, we sang the first hymn this morning. Now, those are the words that I knew as a kid. How many of you did not know those words as a kid? You heard a different song the moment that hymn was starting. Yeah, but see, Abner Neeland in 1808 was commissioned by the Southern Universalist Convention to write a new hymn book. And in a year he did that. And they did it in part because they said, all these hymns, but they don't talk about universalism. We want to change all the words. What a rapscallion. Change the words. And I say it's one of those challenges coming in here as a Unitarian Universalist for the first time, as a visitor to here. Sometimes you do have to have the hymn book in front of you because you cannot believe, and you got to read ahead and see, what are these words? Who changed these words? All right, Abner Neeland. Abner Neeland in the 1820s, he's a Universalist preacher. He's written the Universalist hymn book. He's down here, he's preaching Universalism, so that Universalism begins to get a toehold in North Carolina. Now, why do I say Abner Neeland? Because he was obnoxious. This guy preached sex education for everybody, interracial dancing, and universalism. I mean, this is all stuff to be persecuted for. So he ran back up north again, and he went to Massachusetts again, and he kept improvising in religion, became more of a free thinker, started talking about things in a way that was different from universalism, and published his views in the newspaper, whereupon he was arrested and charged with blasphemy because he said, well, the Universalists believe in a God which I do not, but and he went on and said this and that and whatever else, and society, Boston society, it's like, what was the old phrase, banned in Boston? These Massachusetts folks weren't like North Carolinians who let him come and go, or any number of other preachers who would come and go throughout North Carolina preaching universalism. No, they arrested him. They charged him against the laws of blasphemy that were on the books, and they convicted him. He is the last person convicted of blasphemy in America. I think his final conviction was the 1830s. When did the U.S. Constitution get approved? And yet he was convicted, sent to jail, and guess what could have happened to him? Under the law, he could have been sent to the gallows just like Mary Dyer the Quaker. But I guess they decided they didn't want to do that. A whole bunch of folks said, no, do not make him a martyr. Do not do that. It was a Unitarian judge who convicted him, by the way. Those awful Universalists were even hated by Unitarian judges. It took a century before we merged. A century and a half, actually, if you think about it. Abner Neeland was released. He told his congregation, look, you're all free thinkers. Just go to the Unitarians. They're really just deists, and they don't let anybody know it. Deist was a really bad thing to say somebody was. Like Thomas Jefferson, when he was running for president, everybody accused him of being a French deist, so that it was like, oh, don't vote for him. He's like a French deist. All right, so it's a really bad thing. But he called the Unitarians deists, and then he went to Iowa and set up a commune and became head of the Democratic Party out there. All right. I love our roots. Think of these roots, okay? Going back to Servetus. Servetus, and I'm pronouncing it wrong. Say it again. Miguel Servet. And I pronounce it the way I was taught in theological school. Ground up into English. Miguel Servet. He's going around talking about, hey, the Trinity's wrong, other things are wrong. Would you please stop just telling people they can't speak up in church? If you just listen, you get to the truth here. And he's writing to Calvin. Sorry about this. Stop my timer. I told Christy I was going to go a long time with this sermon. He was going to pass through Calvin's territory. Calvin, for those of you who are Presbyterians, he's like, you had the Catholics, and you had like Martin Luther who pulled away from the Catholics. Then you had Calvin who pulled away from the Lutherans and was preaching predestination and all sorts of things. Calvin was kind of in charge of the moral, if not legal, status of Geneva. He set out certain laws or asked for them to become laws, like you have to go to church. You must go to church. Or if Michael or Miguel Servet ever shows up in Geneva, I want him arrested. He doesn't have to do anything but show up. Well, what does he do? He's been writing. He sent his book about the errors of the Trinity and said, Calvin, you're all wrong. And by the way, here's your book. I've crossed out everything that's wrong in the book that you wrote. And I'd love to talk to you sometime. Calvin's like, no. So he goes through Geneva on his way someplace. Yeah, smart guy. Obnoxious, not so smart. He's immediately recognized. They believe in some of the histories it's because he did follow the law and went to a Wednesday night church service. Well, you have to go. If you don't go, you get arrested. If you go, you get recognized and you get arrested. So he was arrested. He was convicted. He hadn't broken any civil law. He was arrested and convicted and sentenced to burn at the stake. Just to make it all the more clear of how they were annoyed with his teachings in religion, they used green logs, which meant it took a half hour for him to pass out from all the pain and the suffering. He never recanted, and one of his books was strapped to his ankle to burn with him. But not Calvin's copy. Calvin kept his copy with all the markings in the margins, and it was found hundreds of years later. Why is he important to us? Because in Transylvania, some of the leaders had heard of this idea and had begun to make it the king's religion. And the king said, I believe in the freedom of all who have argued their religion here to continue in that freedom. And an edict of toleration. We can have full citizenship for all of the people who argue any of these religions. They're Lutheran, they're Calvinist, they're Unitarian, they're Catholic. You are a full citizen under my rule. And made it an edict. We trace ourselves back in our freedom of religion to Servetus in that way. Servet. How many of you in North Carolina history know Jacob Henry from 1809? I spoke of a Quaker earlier, and I'm going to speak of a Jewish person, Jacob Henry. Jacob Henry was elected to 2 terms in the legislature of North Carolina, but when he was in his 2nd term, about to be sworn in and was going to take office, he was challenged. How could this person under North Carolina law be allowed to take a part in the legislature? Because our law, while it says anybody can practice their religious freedom, says that official offices cannot be held by someone who does not recognize the divine inspiration of the New Testament or the rightness of the Protestant religion. So here's a Jewish person who's shown up already and been a legislator who's now being challenged by somebody, by the way, who didn't know that Jacob Henry was actually absolutely respected among his peers. See, only the Unitarians and Universalists are obnoxious. The Jewish person was not. He was beloved by those in the legislature. He was loved by those who he represented. One speaker who spoke to his defense, William Drew, a single member of the Commons from the town of Halifax. Drew's second term also in the House. He was contemporary, the same time a newcomer had been a newcomer with Jacob Henry. But he had served a much earlier term. He would go on to serve 3 more. I got to tell you about this guy. Drew is not a Unitarian or a Universalist or a Jew, but he's really important to speak to the person who met all the qualifications and couldn't be challenged. And he spoke up for freedom. William Drew had been at that time and from that time forth until 1816 continually reelected as a representative until 1916 when the entire state assembly decided he would become state attorney general. So this is somebody whose writings and words were highly respected, someone who was in power due to his position and his sense of respect. He said, it was objected that Henry refused to swear on the New Testament when he qualified as a member of this house. Does the law say what a man should swear upon? It's all the same if he binds his conscience, whether he swears upon Muhammad's Quran, the Bible, or the New Testament. This is a North Carolinian legal person saying, it doesn't matter what religious tradition you come from, so long as you are swearing your conscience here before us and ascribing yourself to the best cause, you should be accepted as a legislator in this country. Now, the legislature didn't use that. 20 people were swayed over to that idea, but the legislature as a whole didn't get swayed by that argument. They got swayed, I think, by an argument that, well, we're above the law, so it doesn't matter if a Jewish person is elected to the legislature. We won't get into politics and the way legislatures find wiggle room out of it. But I do want to point out anytime people say religious history in North Carolina is not something that's been there forever and ever, I want you to think back to the Quakers and the Jews long before the Civil War, who had been accepted into places of society and power and commerce. That probably helped to make it easier for our Unitarian and Universalist forebears. The National Jewish Outreach Program published Jacob Henry's speech in his own defense, and I won't read it here because it's long, but it's something that you could look at. Jacob Henry. Google him. Find out more. To find a Jewish person speaking up with all of Jefferson's words. Jefferson, who had been known for his work about religious liberty in Virginia. Jefferson, who claimed to be a Unitarian all by himself and wrote to other Unitarians about that. Jefferson, who said he predicted that within 50 years of his death, all people would be Unitarian in America because it was the best religion for our democracy. We have a Jewish person in the Carolinas quoting Thomas Jefferson, the French deist president of our nation, on religious liberty, echoing those phrases. We need to remember these roots. And we need to remember those who are less well known. I got to mention another woman. Winifred Gales. You hear of Winifred Gales? Pre-Civil War era. Winifred Gales. Her husband, Joseph, is a little easier to find. Joseph Sr. founded a newspaper in Raleigh in the late 1700s, became the biggest newspaper. He had been run out of England for his views, being a dissenter, a Unitarian, he and his wife, and had come to North Carolina and had settled in Raleigh and had started a newspaper and he did not believe in slavery, and he was a Unitarian. And yeah, for a couple years, he had to leave town and go up north because it was getting a little too hot for him here, but he came back down later. And his son went on to found All Souls Unitarian Church in Washington, D.C., one of the founders there, along with John Quincy Adams and Calhoun, which we won't talk about Calhoun in this one. But Winifred, his wife, this is what was said in a 1944 edition of the Journal of Southern History, Volume 10, Number 4. Clement Eaton wrote this article. Winifred, Joseph's wife, was one of the genuinely intellectual women of the Old South who occupied a rather singular position in a society that hampered the intellectual development of women by the restraints of the romantic stereotype. They were not native-born Southerners, but were refugees from England who became acclimated in the South. Their home in England was a rendezvous for reformers and free thinkers. Both the Gales were champions of liberal movements at the close of the 18th century. All right, I'm going to quit now. Just to give you some of the ideas of the roots of where we are. We as Unitarian Universalists in North Carolina, we as Unitarian Universalists in this world, we have roots. And whatever may be happening in society saying that we should not have liberal religion, we should not have interpretations of things other than one orthodox way, in whatever ways the open and freeing attitudes that were preached in the past are being told never happened, we know our history, or we do now. We are real, we are here, we are rooted, and we will not be blown over. Blessings on all of you. Thank you for listening. Our closing hymn is on that theme, hymn number 290, Bring, O Past, Your Honor. We'll sing all 4 verses. The words will be on the screen. Holy chiefs of the those of you who are unchurched and don't know what the original words were to that song, we just erased the Trinity. Our closing words are from White Eagle. And I thank Michael for putting me on to these words. White Eagle was the hereditary chief of the Ponca Indians, and White Eagle left a narrative of the Ponca removal from their lands along Nebraska's Niobrara River, and he said in part, "The soldiers forced us across the Niobrara just as one would drive a herd of ponies. And so I reached the warm land, Oklahoma. We found the land there was bad, and we were dying, one after another, and our animals died, and oh, it was very hot. This land is truly sickly, and we hope the Great Father will take us back home again." That is what we said. There were 100 of us died there. This is called Go Forward with Courage by Ponca Chief White Eagle. When you are in doubt, be still and wait. When doubt no longer exists for you, then go forward with courage. So long as mists envelope you, be still. But until the sunlight pours through and dispels the mists, as it surely will, then act with courage. Blessed be. May your going out carry you with the messages of this place and bring you back again, we hope, to this place in love.